Well, Michael, picking the best sportsmen and women over the last 70 years, it's, for me, sort of mission impossible, really, and we're bound to offend a load of people out there by the ones that we have omitted. What was your sort of modus operandi on it? How did you go about making your selections?
Some sports people, some athletes have a quality that's denied others. It's about personality, it's about attitude, it's about skill, it's about all those things. And when the lot of that comes together, that creates somebody extraordinary. As the classic example, Muhammad Ali. I mean, it might not have been the greatest fighter the world could argue, but certainly he was the biggest star in the world. He attracted to the game itself. He attracted people who never had any interest in the game. So that's been the thing I've gone for all the time. So my first choice is, and you will not be surprised at this, Jim, is a Yorkshireman called Fred Truman. Now, I had the distinct pleasure, of playing against Fred when I was about 16 years of age.
Wow. I
opened for Barnsley with Dickie Bird. He was in the forces, he was in the RAF, Fred Truman. He was given leave to go and play cricket. And he turned out for Leeds on their home ground against me and Birdie. We were an opening pair. And Birdie took the first knock, and Birdie, as you know, is a bit of a twitcher with all this going on. And Fred came charging in and he bounced his ball at Birdie, and I frankly didn't see it, and it hit Birdie under the heart. And Birdie went bang like that. And of course with great moanings and utterances, I'm dying, Christ knows what else. So I wandered down the pitch to actually pick up my friend, and the Leeds players were around him, massaging his heart. And Fred Truman was crouched, the mindless crouch like this, at his end where he'd run through. And as I went by, he said, "Where's I going?" I said, "I'm going to see my mate." He said, "I hope he's all right." So we'll go down there. And Dickie is moaning and groaning. Eventually we got patched up and on his feet and ready to face Fred. And I walked past Fred, who was still in the and he said, "How's the mate?" I said, "Oh, he's all right, Mr. Truman." I said, I think he'll live. That's good. He said, "But think on it." He said, "You're next." And I was. I mean,
don't tell me he hit you as well.
But I mean, he didn't have a chance. I hoped to stood back and let him hit my wickets. I mean, I wasn't mad. I mean, he was a great bowler. He was all else apart. Just took away the character of Fred Truman and the personality, which is big enough. He was also, he understood that the cricket is a special game because it can create beautiful rhythms. And Truman's run to the wicket was a thing of beauty, which he did not expect of a man who was 6 foot, weighed 15, 16 stone, walked flat-footed. When he ran, he was a thing of absolute, he's a genius. Wonderful. I could have watched him forever.
He was the first bowler to get those 300 test wickets, wasn't he?
And that's in 62 test matches. Yeah. He played 120, 130 test matches, no more. I mean, he'd have got 500, 600 wickets easily.
Yeah.
The thing about Fred, too, apart from being a great athlete, which he was he was a soul of cricket in a sense. I mean, he brought a humour to the game. He brought a danger to the game, which defined him as much as his great skill as a player. He was a great player, a great performer at his game, artistic, had that feeling as well, but also he had an appeal to people who knew not a thing about cricket.
I've got a little story about him that you might enjoy. When I was a kid collecting autographs at Oxford University Parks, it was April day, and Yorkshire sent a full-strength team down to play the Dark Blues of Oxford, and I waited outside, freezing and shivering on this drizzly April evening, and Fred was last to come out, and I said, "Mr. Truman, could I please have your autograph?" And he looked straight through me and said, "Get off my foot, sonny." More past. Not totally out of character, I don't think.
No.
I'm still traumatised by it.
Yeah. So mine's F.S. Truman, for obvious reasons, Yorkshire and all that. Who have you chosen for your lead man?
Well, I've gone as a lead man, a leader, one of the great captains of British sport. I guess I've been a bit self-indulgent in a couple of my choices and that how they reflect on me and the effect they had on me. And I've been lucky enough to be presenting the programme when England won the Rugby World Cup in Sydney. And there's a little thing on the wall here that shows that 82% of the watching public watched that game that Saturday morning.
I remember it well. As somebody in the public who watched it.
Yeah, and at the front for England was Martin Johnson, and I think leadership in sport is a hugely important aspect of any successful team, and he did everything and more that he asked anybody else to do. Clive Woodward was the coach with the theory, he did the practical stuff, and how he led that team that day into extra time as well. And there's a little story before they went out, and that Martin Johnson always had a line or two to the players right when they were in the tunnel. He'd look round and give them a line or two, always say something to them. On that World Cup final, he looked round and said nothing. And he explained that afterwards, and he said, I looked into all their eyes and I knew they were ready. Didn't have to say a word. And I don't know, that image of Martin lifting that World Cup, that'll live with me. And the fact, I guess, that I say it is a selfish one, that I was there and nobody can take it away from me.
That was a great moment.
And it was
in all of sport.
Correct me if I'm wrong, there aren't too many England captains that have lifted World Cups in my lifetime that I can. It's not a long list.
It's an interesting point you raised there about leadership. It's not something you can learn. I suppose you can, you'll pick it up. But the best ones, I mean, you make Johnson sound, he had that instinct. He looked around and said nothing. I mean, you know, it's something within them that they know works with a group of people that they've worked with all the time. It's an extraordinary gift.
Yes, he had an aura and he had a presence. I think if you break it down, Michael, leadership, I mean, thankfully neither of us have been there, but if you're in a trench and your life depended on it and you looked down, you saw Martin Johnson there, you'd say, I think I'm going to be
He'd be the guy, would he?
I think he'll look after me.
Yeah.
So Michael, on to your next choice. And you've gone for the man mountain, the gentle giant that was John Charles.
All those things were true, and a great footballer. I mean, John was a really gentle, kind, nice man. I mean, he was too nice to play soccer. I mean, particularly at centre back, you know. Went to get a bit rough, but I met him in a very strange circle. He was a hero of mine already, and after I'd started getting recognised a bit, I was inevitably offered all kinds of jobs, which I took.
As you do.
To judge beauty contests and things like that, you know. So there was a beauty contest in Birmingham, which I went along to, and I'm at the bar afterwards having a drink, and there's a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and I looked up because there he was, this huge man, and he said, "You don't know me," he said, "but I'm John Charles."
Amazing.
I said, "Go on, come on, do it again," you know. I don't know him, for God's sake. And he said, I really want to just talk to you. I've seen you on television and things, and I thought we might have a natter, and I've read your stuff and all that sort of thing. And from that developed a kind of, not a close friendship, but we knew each other at least, and so now and again I'd glance off him.
In those days, the maximum wage was there, and one of the reasons why he moved from Leeds to Italy was that Juventus, with the Agnelli family, could offer him a sizable
and they did.
Pile of lira, you know,
yeah.
And Leeds had a ceiling they couldn't go beyond.
And in Italy, they adored him too. I mean, he was a bigger star there than he ever was in this country as a player. But I like the simplicity of the man. And I like the fact that although he knew, as all great athletes do, that he was very good at his job, maybe the best, you would never have known that had you met him and not known who he was. He'd never have told you what he did or how good he was. He had that innate modesty, which is very charming in somebody as good and as rich in talent as he was.
They were astonished in Italy by his temperament, weren't they, Michael?
Yes.
Where the dark arts that went on there,
Yeah.
and some of them not so sly, and he never reacted. I think there was a little Argentine, Sivori, who he played, who couldn't understand it. Could not understand it.
Who would kick anything that moved.
Precisely.
Yeah,
precisely.
even in a lead shirt.
Yeah, precisely.
I just had that wonderful memory of this big, tall, impressive athlete who was genuinely gentle and very nice and soft-spoken and a true representative of the sporting ideal.
A lot of people will find it incredible these days, Michael, as well, that, as you alluded to, you could start one game at centre-half and finish it up front. I mean, as an acknowledged tactic, not desperation.
No.
He was that good in both positions.
Yeah, absolutely. he had a physical grace about him which was quite extraordinary.
How important is that for you?
Very much.
How people play the game, not necessarily how successful they are.
I think that manners in anything matter. And I think that as the game gets increasingly in the hands of coaches who forget to actually remind players about the beauty of being an athlete, that somehow it gets lost. I mean, not altogether, of course it doesn't. But some people need reminding that one of the great aesthetic pleasures about watching a sport is to watch grace in action. And when that happens, that for me is the fulfillment. Then I know why I love sport.
And how much would John Charles be worth in the current market?
John Charles, centre forward, 75 million, centre back, 100 million. You know,
you're getting two players in one. You've got a bargain.
Work it out, you know. but as I said, the nice thing about it too is you're buying a good man. You know, he wasn't going to let you down ever.
Just finally on John Charles, someone once said to me in Italy when I was working there, they said, if you ever go to Turin and you go to a restaurant there and you want a friendly reception, mention the name John Charles.
He was a huge, and still is, a huge hero there. Second choice now, because it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, from all the people, you've had a lifetime look at all kinds of sports. You've seen more athletes than I have.
Well, there'll be a flicker of concern when I say the name Linford Christie. And
oh yes.
And I am.
Which Linford Christie we're talking about?
I am expecting that, and I will fight Linford's corner. Twice, by the way, winner of the SGA Sportsman of the Year trophy.
Yes.
So I put that down first of all. And again, I've looked at great performers and I looked how they've affected me and how I guess they've helped me in many ways. Had a dozen years doing the athletics, and I could say to you as a program maker as well that I reckon the vast majority of those programs, if I hadn't mentioned Linford Christie's name in the first 30 seconds, I'd be very surprised. He was absolute box office. He was a terrific seller of the sport of athletics. And by the way, how sad is it now when athletics has gone since the heady days of the 90s when it was peak time television viewing? That's another topic. Linford took on the American sprinters. He won Olympic gold. He was world champion, European champion as well. He divided opinion, especially in the media. He was hard work for quite a few of the media. He was hard work, and I don't think quite a few of them forgave him for that. He had a single-minded coach, a guy called Ron Rodden, Michael, who looked after him all the way through his career. He was entitled to be an angry human being at times. I'll tell you a little story about him. The first sponsored car he got, and he collected this car and was stopped 3 times in the first 5 days driving around Shepherd's Bush because he was a black man driving a new car. And when stuff like that happens, I think you're entitled to have a little bit of an attitude. Let's put it that way. But I put Linford Christie up there because of what he did for the sport of athletics, because of how he looked the best in the eye and beat them. I think you've got to be a totally single-minded human being to succeed at that particular sport. And I know later on he failed a drugs test. Later on, it was so late he retired from international competition. I think he was coming back for a bet, to be quite honest, and that is a stain that is held against him. I don't think it's ever easy being Linford Christie, if I'm honest.
Well, I would agree with that, and I mean, I didn't have any contact with him, but I of course was around the time when he was a big media star. You said there that he had this uneasy relationship with some of the media. Was that his fault, or was it the fault of media? What happened there? What was it?
I think, again, without going into too great a detail, I think the media were guilty. Concentrate on certain aspects of his physicality and things like that, and he was entitled to be upset about that. And listen, there are very few of our top level sportsmen who have ideal relationships with the media. All I know that in those stadiums that he filled at Crystal Palace in particular, and Birmingham, Gateshead, whatever, he people came to see him. They came to see that 10 seconds, would you believe?
Yes.
You know, which is gone in the blink of an eye. Yes. And he was a showman too, and a character. And who do you think you are, Linford Christie? That's what people. What would they say now? What would they say now? I mean, there isn't anybody, unfortunately. Linford knew the game. I think that sport, it's a blink of an eye. It's a little slip, and you're either a winner or a loser.
I think also too. I mean, going back to those times as well. God knows that the situation is not perfect now with black athletes or being black in any event. You can't calculate that, can you? I mean, as white people, we never think about that something happening to you. I mean, what would happen if it did? I mean, you'd go potty, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, the really sad aspect of that for me is that if you look me in the eye and said, has anything changed? I would look you back and say, I'm not sure it has. And that's really sad.
You think that?
That's really sad.
Yes.
I think it's tough it was tough being Linford Christie. What he did on the track for Britain, you can't take it away.
Good choice. Yeah, you're right. An important figure in more senses than one in the history of British sport.
Well, your next choice, I think you got on record as that you felt a bit like his elder brother at times. But goodness me, what a talented younger brother to have. George Best.
I thought about this because, you know, in a sense he did divide people. Oh, he's being daft, he drank himself to death, all that sort of thing. And that's true. He was an alcoholic. He was without doubt also the greatest player I ever saw, greatest footballer. He really was. He had the lot, including courage. He had the lot. Matt Busby said that. Matt Busby said to me once that he was probably the best player in any position in his entire squad. And he said the only person I would actually not tell that I said that was Harry Gregg, because Harry Gregg could go and beat him up.
The goalkeeper.
Yeah. When I saw him, I knew what Matt was talking about, because he had absolute, total mastery of every aspect that the forward wanted. He could dribble, he could pass, he could tackle. He was a fierce tackler. He's a very modern footballer in that sense. He could play in any position. They wanted him midfield or wherever. His problem was, of course, that from a very early age, he had a taste for drink, and he became a drunkard. And that, in the end, was what killed him.
I remember I saw him in the meaningless end-of-season game at Coventry City, and they had Messrs Sillett and Curtis in their back four, and they kicked him from pillar to post, and he just got up, went past them, got up, went past them. He had plenty of ticker, didn't he? But it was a candle that was always going to burn brightly and not for very long.
I think that was a tragedy, and people who knew him well, and I became a very close friend of his, could see it happening. And the argument you always have with yourself, and I know I've been told this by other close friends of his, was, you know, could we have done anything about it? But I don't think we could. He was a very willful lad. He decided his way, he decided what he wanted to be and how he wanted to live, and that was it. And who are we to say, because we think he's a great footballer, that he's wrong? I mean, you know, he enjoyed his life. He didn't die. He died tragically in the sense he died too young, but he didn't die with a sour soul or anything like that. I mean, he had a good time. I mean, look at the women and all that sort of stuff, you know. I mean, George enjoyed it, you know. But as a player, I mean, I think Matt's the one to say it. When Matt says that he's the best player possibly in any position in my entire squad, then that's saying something. I mean, you can't say that about many players. You really cannot.
The first sort of football superstar, wasn't he? The first.
Yes. I mean, he was like a Hollywood star, wasn't he, really? He should have been called Brad Best, something like that. But he was also a very nice kid. I mean, he used to, when he was on the run from the media or whatever, he'd come down to our house, and the first time we knew he'd arrived, over the wall would be thrown a bag of balls, a big enough bag of balls, over. And the kids would go potty, and then we'd go out in the garden and he'd start playing football with them. And he was keen. I mean, he didn't know to be about it. He used to tackle them out and show them things and all that sort of thing. And Michael, my youngest boy, who's now my business partner, it was that long ago, one day played against him and went to school the next day. And the teacher said to Michael and the kids, what do you do at the weekend? And Michael said, I played football with George Best. She said, Michael, don't tell lies. He said, I didn't know, Mike. He came to our house, he said, and he had lunch. And he stayed. He said, it was a girl's girlfriend. Michael, I don't treat him up, please. No, write down 100 times. I mustn't tell fibs. Right? So he came back and he told George this. So George said, give me a pad, a little notepad. And he said, dear sister so-and-so, I just write down this note to tell you that George Best did in fact play football with me and wasn't lying. Yours sincerely, George Best. And they gave it to the teacher, and she said, I'm just terribly sorry. I wish I'd been there, she said.
You've obviously got a few regrets about what happened, particularly later in life. Was there any way that anyone could have managed him? Anyone could have been sterner with him? Was there any way that could have steered him away from it?
Matt, you could make the argument that the younger Matt Busby, pre-Munich, might have taken a stronger line with him. Matt was different and changed. It wouldn't be after what he went through. But nonetheless, I still think George was a willful man. And he never misunderstood what he had, what gift he had, nor did he misunderstand the price people would pay for it. So he was very secure in that knowledge that he got this great gift and the great riches that came with it. Not great riches in those days, but comfortable riches. And he enjoyed it. I mean, he enjoyed that part of his life which we look upon as a tragedy. He never quite saw it like that. I was in Australia, right? And he was over there playing for some awful club up Northern Territories or something. And he called me up and he said, listen, I'm in a bit of trouble. I said, what? He said, well, they're holding my passport at the club. I don't have any money. I can't stand up here. I want to go home. I said, so we'll fix it, no problem at all. So I got made to do that. Eventually, George comes down to the hotel and staying in Sydney, and we got a ticket for him to go back to London, and everything is fine. So we meet in the morning for breakfast, right? Breakfast. So we have some bacon and egg and all that sort of thing. And I say to George, look, your taxi's coming for you shortly. I've got to go upstairs and do a bit of business. I'll come back down and we'll say goodbye and that. I go upstairs, come back down, he's gone. No sign of him. But there's a bottle of brandy on the table, empty.
Wow.
I said, waiter, what happened? Well, he said, he ordered the brandy, says, after you left. He didn't drink all of it. He said he gave it to another guy. He said, but he did a considerable amount, and I thought, well, they won't let him on the airplane. But they did, and he got home, and he called me and said, you might have seen the bottle of brandy. Yeah, I said, sorry about that. Had to do it. And I knew then that he was in trouble, that it had gone beyond that which you talk about and joke about, that there was a real need for him to seek professional help, which he did, but he was never going to admit what he was, which was how to control.
I think all the stories you've told about George just underline the fact that in there he had a really good heart and the total absence of malice despite the very physical game that he played in.
Absolutely, all of that. And I missed his going to see him in hospital because I took the coward's way out. A pen ran me up and said, have you been to see George? And I said, no, and I mean to. He said, don't go. He said, he looks absolutely awful. He's yellow. He said, it's terrible. And, you know, he's just dying. And I sadly didn't do it. And it's a matter of great regret with me that I didn't do it. Although I don't know what I could have said to him that I'd not said to him before, or told him what I'd not told him before. I mean, we had a nice, close relationship, and I'm honoured to think that, you know, happy to think that he was my mate. You know. So third choice, and I know I'm going to like this one because you've told me. But go on, tell them more.
I think you'll like this one. I've gone for Bobby Charlton.
Oh, yes.
Again,
oh, yes.
winding the clock back to my youth. And I used when you go on foreign trips or little holidays, and you couldn't speak the language, and people would look at you blankly in France or anything, and you go, Bobby Charlton. Bobby Charlton. It was a passport. It was a universal language for Bobby. And again, growing up, listen, I've been exceptionally lucky. My late dad took me to a game at Highbury one February day, Arsenal against Manchester United, and it ended up Arsenal 4, Manchester United 5, and Bobby scored, and that was the last game the Busby Babes played in England before Munich.
Really?
And I guess I was 10, 11 at the time, and I could relate to those Busby Babes, so they weren't that much older than me, really. And I can remember exactly where I was when the news came over the radio, what had happened in Munich, and I can remember bursting into tears at hearing that news. And of course, Bobby survived that crash, came back playing ludicrously quickly after that sort of trauma. And it was so sad, really, because it obviously changed him as a human being, as a man. And he lost all his mates, he lost all his pals, and still came back and still played and was still this phenomenally gifted player, but found it hard to enjoy things a lot. I always felt with Bobby that he just kept that little bit back, and that little bit was probably left on the runway in Munich, really. What he did, of course, for England in the World Cup subsequently to that, and then being captain when Manchester United won the European Cup finally for Sir Matt. And that was all in my sort of formative teenage years, growing up, when you're looking and wondering at this game. And again, you and me have got I think we've got the sort of same feelings about what we admire in sport and the way he conducted himself, Bobby, throughout on the pitch as well. And what a player! I mean, what a player! I mean, he banged them in from 25 yards, dropped the shoulder, and he got a couple of goals in the World Cup semi-final that took England through to that final.
Yes.
And to me, I mean, I can remember it as well. He'd kill for them now when the old locks used to flow back a bit when he ran and things like that. But yeah, he's a hero, Bobby, and I don't honestly think that you can be a football lover and no matter who he played for and not love Bobby Charlton.
No, he's an impeccable man. He's behaved impeccably. I think if I were picking an England team to play for my life, it would have him and Bobby Moore as the two certainties. Then you'd be all right. I
think so. But you being based up in Manchester, you must have had a lot to do with Bobby at that time as well.
I did. I got to know him. I mean, he's not noble in the sense that he's naturally gregarious and all, because he's not. But nonetheless, he was what's the word? He was a comfortable man to be with, I found. I never found it was awkward to talk to him at all, in a private situation. And I share your admiration for him, and he's the exemplar we want to show to a kid and say, behave like that on the field,
It's hard now with TV techniques then as well to appreciate just how great he was. I mean, he's voted the best player in the World Cup in '66, and he pretty much was the best player in the world in many people's eyes at that time.
I mean, if anybody defined the kind of football team player that Busby wanted, it was him, wasn't it? It really was.
And there was a deep-seated loyalty in Bobby Charlton as well, which is another trait that I admire.
Yes.
That Bobby Charlton equals Manchester United.
Yes. Well, any proposed move, they'd burn down the town hall, for God's sake. Fans, is unthinkable.
Okay, Michael, those are our picks then, and we got a couple of wild cards we want to throw in as well. You go first.
Yeah, Nick Faldo. Nick, who was not everybody's cup of tea, and a lot of that was his own fault. He was a very uneasy man in relationships. I just admired the way that he went about, the determination he had to be a great golfer. He wasn't a Tiger Woods, anything like that, a natural player, but he learned and worked hard at it and didn't give a stuff what people said about him. He had that blinkered attitude toward becoming a great champion, which he was. I mean, what he proved to me, Nick, was the virtue of being assured in your own mind that you could do it, that you were good by God, hook or by crook. And I admire that in anybody. It's a kind of determination that gets VCs for soldiers. And he got his VC too. He got recognised now as one of our greatest golfers, and so he should be. And your wild card?
Well, my wild card is Greavesy, Jimmy Greaves.
Oh, yeah.
Still the record goal scorer in the top flight of English football. Magnificent player. I went to watch him once at White Hart Lane, and the score was Tottenham 7, Liverpool 2. Greaves 4, and I came back on the tube, chatting to my pal, and I said to him, mind you, he didn't do much else, did he? and the whole carriage erupted with laughter. Instinctive scorer, stroked the ball in, just had that nous of being in the right place at the right time. And also, I was very, very lucky to work with Jimmy on TV as well. I don't think you can ask for too much more than to be brilliant in one aspect of your life and then outstanding in the second aspect.
Yeah.
And Jimmy had that, and he's a nice fella too. I really like him.
He was a good bloke, Jimmy.
Okay, Michael, let us move to the greatest sportsman of the last 70 years, in our humble opinions.
Yeah.
And we've agreed on one
as
well, and it is Dame Mary Peters.
The Grand Dame.
The Grand Dame.
I love her. I really love her. She's such a warm spirit, and she was also very good at what she did in athletics, and also too, as a political figure in a very grim time in Ireland. She stood up for what she believed in. She fought a noble fight and has done all her life. She has immense charm, and as an athlete had immense talent too. And that, I think it's that will to survive, will to win, that helped her to be that as well, as much as anything else.
And when she won that gold medal in Munich, it came at a time when the Troubles were raging in Northern Ireland. It gave people a different view of that particular country as well, didn't it? But it was unbelievable. The last event, she had to be the local heroine, Heidi Rosenthal, had to get very close to her in the 200 metres, which he did.
Yes.
Gets the gold medal, and of course, then the next day is the Munich massacre.
That's right.
I mean,
terrible, isn't it?
Awful
Absolutely
timing.
awful. You're haunted by those shots, aren't you? The balcony, the far balcony, the figures on it, and all that. It's terrifying. It really was. But she, you know, I mean, she'd not in a sense dealt with it. How could that be so? But she was in Ireland at a troubled time too. She had her life threatened by the IRA, and she didn't budge an inch.
They said, didn't they? I think after Munich, if you come back and have any sort of parade through the streets, you're dead.
We're going to shoot you.
And she did it. She did it.
And it wasn't an idle threat either. There was evidence that it was not that at all. But what I like about her was that it's the value of a sense of humour. She's a wonderful, jolly woman. I mean, she's very bright. She doesn't put on the jolly act at all. But by nature, it seems to me that she likes to laugh. She likes to have a good time. And whenever I was in a company, you kind of fed off this. You know, it was like being with one of those large cuddly toys. You know, you could look at her and just feel reassured that all was well with the world. And far from the truth was the fact that it wasn't all well in her world for most of her life. But she came through it with great humour and style.
And she had great pride and joy in competing. I think that's what always resonated with me. That you can see again, even in the heat of battle, that she enjoyed what she was doing.
Yeah, she was inspirational too, wasn't she? I mean, you imagine, it wasn't easy growing up in Ireland at that time. And I can imagine those kids who looked at her and saw the way she was, and a vibrant personality, grew great confidence from her.
And post-competing, she set up her foundation, and a lot of very good Northern Irish athletes have benefited from it. Rory McIlroy, Carl Frampton, for example. So she's done a heck of a lot after competing. And we used to, when we did the athletics, we used to always have a meeting at the Mary Peters track, just outside of Belfast, and at that time, and it was still a little bit edgy, and the taxi drivers used to take great delight in driving us through some of the darker areas of the city and be looking at us in the mirror and saying, I think you're terrified here, aren't you, really? But again, that was, and all the athletes, when they could, they always tried to take part in that meeting because of how much respect and love and admiration they have for Mary, Michael.
Well, I'm great minds think alike then. Eh?
Makes a change.
Yeah. Unheard of.
Your second choice, you've gone for another wonderful all-rounder, Jessica Ennis.
That's right. What do you think about that choice then?
I love it. No, really good. Really good, because
she was remarkable.
Because yes, and I think again from her point of view, I mean, she should have done really well in Beijing in 2008, and she gets injured. And then, of course, the next Olympic Games that everyone's looking forward to is London 2012. And can you remember the pressure and the strains? And you had people arrived at Heathrow Airport, and there was the big visuals of Jess coming through, and it was the ultimate nation expects really on her. Yes. And for any athlete to everyone's a home advantage, but there's monstrous home pressure as well.
Yes.
When you have that heaped on you, and I think 80,000 people turned out and watched her first event. You normally got about 18 would watch that, and the Olympic Stadium was packed, and good on her, and she came through on that Super Saturday and delivered. And again, it's a sort of you'd want her as You'd want her as your next door neighbour. You want, if your son said, "I'm going to marry that one," you go, "Yeah, that'll be fine." Yeah, you know, and a thoroughly grounded human being, with a great coach, Tony Minicello, who looked after her all the way through. And for me, one of those that when you see her compete, you think, "That's great. She's wearing a British vest. Really, that is absolutely brilliant that she's competing for us." And did it in 2012, and then. Came back and 4 years later got a silver medal, which is not the worst way to bow out of your career either. A silver in the Olympics, is it really?
Don't fade away.
And no, they don't. And look, hugely, but very grounded as well. And yeah, a bit of Sheffield steel in there from Jess too. So great choice.
I'm glad you explained why I chose her. So your second choice is Virginia Wade. I mean, important, of course, because of what she did, what she brought to the game. Not exactly, and I mean this in the nicest possible sense of the word, an athlete who's made you excited about the prospect of seeing her, or am I being too cruel?
I'm not sure. I think we haven't had that many individual women's tennis champions.
Oh no, I mean rare.
Yeah, rare species.
Yeah.
And Virginia Wade, who I believe overall competed at Wimbledon 26 times. I think that's a record. Yeah. And she tried, and goodness me, did she get her timing right? 1977 Queen's Jubilee, and Virginia Wade wins at Wimbledon and comes from a set down and beats Betty Stover in the final. And I picked Virginia Wade because I thought, well, no one's done it since. No British women.
Nobody's been anywhere near it.
I think so. And so you go, ultimate respect. I did Wimbledon once, and I presented Wimbledon for the BBC Radio the next year in 1978. And I had a little interesting side story for you. I'm 2 minutes from going on air, and someone said, "Jim, you've got to take this phone call. It's the BBC pronunciation department." And I went, "Really?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Is that Rosenthal?" "Yes, it is. We just want to make sure you're pronouncing the men's defending champion correctly." And I went, "Really? How would that be?" "Bjorn Borg."
Borg?
And I said, "Look, pal." I said, people are going to be turning on and saying, "How much does he know about tennis?" And I start talking about Bjorn Borg. I've got a fortnight's broadcast ahead of me. I'm dead in the water. Thank you very much indeed. So that was my little Wimbledon story. But the better one than that was, again, I remember Peter Jones, a great broadcaster, BBC radio broadcaster, and Virginia Wade got the trophy from Her Majesty the Queen. Very unusually, Her Majesty the Queen had gone to watch the tennis and presented it to Virginia Wade, and Peter Jones came out with a line, "And Virginia Wade will take tea with the Queen." And I thought that was a great line of commentary. And I said, I picked Virginia Wade, again, not everyone's automatic choice, I'm sure, but just because she did something extraordinary that year, and it's not been done since, so I almost rest my case, really.
I mean, one of the great sadnesses of British tennis is the lack of women players who actually achieved what she did. I mean, given home advantage, you'd think we'd show much better than that, given the amount of money there is in the game in coaching. And that, I mean, you go to Wimbledon, it's packed and full of all the good and the great, all that sort of stuff, and yet we can't produce anybody who gets further than the second round.
It's gone by the first Tuesday almost, aren't they really? But again, it was a time for tennis when the amateur game was disappearing and the professional game was just coming in. She was sort of bridging that gap as well. But she did it, and she's a British winner. She's a rare British winner as well, and that's why I nominated her.
A good choice.
Well, Michael, your final choice in your women's selection, the original Golden Girl.
Yes, Mary girl Rand. As talented as she was beautiful, Mary Rand. I think the first thing I had to say about Mary Rand was that my first view of her, I fell in love with her. And I think the world did. I think everybody loved Mary. I mean, she was gorgeous, wasn't she? Princess, wonderful. But she was also a very, very fine athlete. She really was tough. And also, I think you've got to put into perspective, the time that she was operating. I mean, there's an awful lot of drug factories employed in the further regions of the world. And there weren't too many people that she played against who were not full of stuff that they didn't know to be full of. And you have to take into consideration when you look at her record, because it's a heck of a record, considering she wasn't on the kind of dopes that they were on. And I think that's an important point to make, because what could she have done had she been facing opposition that was clean?
And she was also competing at a time when, without being in any way disrespectful, women's sport was a bit of an afterthought, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, absolutely. But she had a lot, didn't she? She was a film star. I mean, she was a total package. She looked great. She was a great athlete, all those things. She was articulate. She was very single-minded. She was very tough-minded, all those things. And she was a poster girl for women's sport, the first that we'd actually had, because you're quite right. They didn't have much of a profile before Mary came along. And what they had was certainly not what she gave it. I mean, it was irresistible what she gave it.
And winning that women's long jump at the Tokyo Olympics in '64, world record along the way. Yeah. Astonishing, really.
Jumped out of the pit, didn't she? I mean, and she was. The other thing too about her was that she was wonderful to watch. She was graceful. She had this lovely, going back to, you know, the thing I talked about. We talked about Fred Truman. This grace that's allied to sport is the irresistible ingredient for me. It's the one that charms you, that delights you, that you remember.
So, someone called her the Marilyn Monroe of athletics at that time, which is a good description, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, in Wells, where she comes from, they've actually measured out that jump. I think it's in Market Square, Wells. It's still there to this day. If you go to Wells, have a look at it, and they've got the
jump, the length of it,
length of the jump actually measured out there.
One of my other choices I would have had in this category was Dorothy Hyman, only because, you know, I was born in the same place as she was, Curtis, and her dad was a miner, worked down Grimthorpe Pit like my dad did. And I knew from a very early age of how she would travel 8 miles to because there weren't too many facilities, shall I say, in that area particularly. But I was delighted to be invited back to unveil a plaque on the wall of what used to be my cricket club, which is now the Dorothy Hyman Stadium, right?
That's right.
And I felt really famous at that point. I really did.
And again, in her era, Michael, I mean, it's just crazy to think of it now. So she retired, and she writes a book, and then wants to come back, retired too early, and they said, no, you can't compete internationally.
You can hardly
You're
believe
a professional.
That's disgraceful. You can hardly believe it.
It's astonishing.
So she writes the book, and she's banned from appearing in amateur sport. I mean, how stupid can you be? And also the point in her life where she was at her prime, in a sense, you know. She's now, I mean, she always was a bright girl and always had a decent sort of kind of public spirit of responsibility, handle herself well in public and all that sort of fame and all that nonsense. And I see now that she's a care worker in the Barnsley area, which doesn't surprise me at all, because that's the kind of girl she was, you know.
And just going back to Mary Rand, how big do you think she would be now in the world of social media and things like that, with looks like that, and with ability like that, and with natural charm like that?
You'd love to be an agent of hers, wouldn't you? She was she was heaven sent, wasn't she? And you're quite right. In a different kind of world we live in now, where it's international, where everybody were geared towards the big events, and that, she would have been a superstar. Well then, final choice of yours.
Final choice, right up to date with Dina Asher-Smith.
Oh, well.
In my eyes, the best woman sprinter I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In the UK, and if there had been an Olympics this year, absolutely no doubt in my mind that she'd have been a golden girl in Tokyo, as Mary Rand was all those years ago. Very single-minded girl, very hard worker, and had a wonderful coach, a man called John Blackie, who we recognised at these awards a year ago, actually, and they have this wonderful relationship. It's a very simple relationship. You work hard, you work harder, and you work harder, and you get the results. There's no subterfuge. There's no complexity about it. And very level-headed girl. I've been lucky enough to share a stage with her again at these awards. I've been immensely impressed by the way she's handled her fame. And she also went, the same as my son, actually went to King's College and studied history there. And actually, a bit close to your heart, she specialised in jazz as well as part of her thesis.
In jazz,
and a little bit of the old bit of Louis Armstrong was in there as well. There's a specialised subject. So
he could play a bit.
Yeah, he could play, and just a very well-rounded, grounded athlete, really. And she could have done loads and loads of commercial stuff. She's kept that under control, very well advised. And it won't happen this year for her, but it will happen next year at the Olympics, I'm absolutely sure. And she was, again, no toys out of the pram when the Olympics was called off. She took it in her stride. I think she went off and had a chocolate cake and a couple of things that she couldn't have had otherwise. And now back in full training as well. And I just think we've spoken a lot about great athletes of the past. Here you have a modern example of a really talented, a really grounded human being. At a troubled time for her sport, by the way, who was doing everything absolutely right. And I'm delighted to have her in my top 3.
She's a spectacular performer, isn't she? She really is. There's a different kind of quality about her. It's like she's supercharged.
And I think she's now got that, especially in the 200 metres. Right. She's now got that, a bit like one of your favourites with Ali, when you go into the ring and the opponent would look and go, I'm beaten here. I've got no chance here, and I think the people will be starting to look at her and thinking, I'm second's the best I can get.
That's interesting, isn't it?
They've got that sort of aura.
Yes.
And in that sport, it's important to have that, and has done it purely by her achievements, purely by her
reputation,
by how she's done it. And she had a wonderful time at the World Championships in Doha last year, and I say she's done very, very little wrong. She's kept herself fit, which is great, stayed injury-free pretty much, because that's a sport where you can get hurt, and so, little injuries can cause a lot, Michael. But
so let's assume we get the postponed Olympics at some point soon.
Yeah.
How long has an athlete like her got?
Looking at her.
What is she now? 20?
Yes, mid-20s. Looking at her, I think she's got another Olympics in her, definitely.
You do.
Definitely, yeah, and of course the Olympics will be squeezed up a little bit now anyway.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I would think, she's. I'd love to think that the best is still to come, really. But it's because of these awards really that I've had the chance to meet her and her family as well, and they're a very, very impressive group. And I always think that if you've got a good coach behind you and a good family behind you, goodness me, it really does help in sport. And she'll have the same sort of attention that Jess had in the Olympics in 2012 on her, Michael, but I look at her and I don't think she's one to crumble under it, really. And she's, by the way, I always, she's got a great smile, a fantastic smile on her when things go well, and good on her. And again, another one that these awards are recognised, and deservedly so. And so we're just doing our little bit to follow that. I found this conversation absolutely fascinating, and love the stories as well. But we've omitted a lot of people, haven't we? And it's been tough.
We could do this on a daily basis for a month, and no, but it's true. And that's the joy of sport, is a lifetime in sport. Particularly, don't just look at one sport, but then a lot. That you actually have this great cast of extraordinary people. And you do feel blessed to actually be there to see them, and sometimes to meet them, and sometimes to make friends with them.
And I think we're also very fortunate that we both still get a buzz out of watching sport, who's going to win and who's going to lose and who's going to do what and who's going to be the star and who's going to be the villain. And I reckon I will have that, and I'm sure you feel the same until I breathe my last one, if I'm honest. Well, we've made our choices, and it'd be very interesting to see how many of them you agree with or disagree with.